organizations to collaborate. In my view, all these strategies are underpinned by adopting an entrepreneurial approach, because no matter how good your science is, its economic value will come from entrepreneurship. But over the years, the internet has made it easier to access markets and find investors if this is of interest. These three people in the slide here have all built companies on the research part, from small operations to an exit through a trade sale. Tom Black took his company from 30 people to a flotation, which was then taken private for 580 million. Peter Molyneux, with his business partner, in many ways founded the current games cluster in Guildford through Bullfrog and then through Lionhead Studios. And of course, Professor Sir Martin Sweeting, who we all know, created SSTL from his PhD work. A superficial look at the process of commercializing technology involves taking ideas out of the discovery phase, where money goes into technology, to taking money out of technology. And this involves an assessment of value when ideas are tested against competition and demand. And if it passes the test, planning opportunities for exploitation. So creating the structure to do that. And on the research part, with our partners in Research and Innovation Office, like Set Squared, we help to do this by sharing some of the risks. This scaling process seems to me to have to deal with 4 journeys. And I've gained that from the experience of running the park. And on the technology journey, and also actually I've started 3 companies and put my house on the line for 2 of them. So a bit of experience. And on the technology journey, it's about testing the principle, concept, viability, scalability, value, and quality of a product or technology, with the intention of creating a warrantable product or service. The market journey is the hardest, but most critical. Without customers, there's of course no investors, no finance. And finding customers is the most difficult challenge. It means overcoming complete, in some cases, market indifference. And to do this might involve field trials, finding early adopters, and then eventually finding regular profitable sales. And in fact, this is the route that Sir Martin took with SSTL when he launched a satellite as part of his PhD. That was a field trial, got into space and attracted commercial interests, and on that basis, built a business. Building the company requires people with the right skill sets, and most start with 1 or 2 founders. Then investors are brought in, they bring skills, they add to the base, and then you need a skills base on top of that, including those for selling. And of course, the talent needed is determined by the nature of the business, and timing is everything to match staff costs to their value creation. The optimum regulation journey is where these are either neutral or positive. And that also applies to the tax environment, which, if supported, gives favourable terms to investors, both of which are matters for governments. And building a company means having ideas that can be sold for more than they cost, and working up these ideas into a value proposition for customers, which requires you giving truthful answers to questions that include: what problem is my business going to solve? Why this technology? And who are the potential customers? And how can I reach them? It's about funding and cost. It's about funding the company and the cost of the company of getting to the customers, and how much, if anything, a customer is already spending to address that need today. To help answer these and other questions, there's now a whole array of programs and modeling tools that can be used. The well-known ones, I'm sure you've heard of some of these or even used them, created by a PhD student in Switzerland, Alex Osterwalder, is the business model canvas. This looks at the value proposition and links it to key partners, resources and activities through customer relationships and sales channels, and gives the opportunity to balance cost structure with revenue streams. Other extensions of this include the value proposition in Lean Canvas, and there's also Balanced Startup Program, or of course, best of all, prior market knowledge, or if you're doing research, because I believe some of you might be PGRs, you might visit trade fairs to see what's going on in the commercial sector to get some market knowledge on which to think about these ideas. And using the Balanced Startup Program is helpful because it means you can put metrics to the strengths and weaknesses against each of the parameters shown in this slide. And an incubation phase of when you're building the company, you can repeat this every 3 months to measure progress. And at a certain stage, if you're in the Set Squared incubation program, which is run through research and innovation and sits on the park, they would assess when you are finance ready and then train you to pitch to investors. And the R&I team are experts in pitch training. You need to get the message over in 10 minutes, show you're an investable individual. And of course, there's much more to be said about incubation and business acceleration programs, but I'm going to move on. Having said that, some things never change. And in 1984, at the first meeting of the UK Science Park Association, a guy from Birmingham put up a slide on the screen showing the red line of using resources that you see on this slide. The same applies today. But what is different is that there's a clutch of financing options for developing technology which have emerged. These range from grants if the company's tech matches a government ambition. There's R&D tax credits with catchbacks if you're a company that makes losses. It's a specialist area where you can talk to an accountant to help you gain an understanding of how to pitch your tax credits application. There's also an open innovation as an exit for your company, and it's now more common, it's very rare in the early days. And other changes include the technology readiness level scale at the bottom of the slide. It helps put some metrics to technology readiness for the market. And over 35 years of creating and running the park, I've met about 500 companies or so, and it seems to me that they fall into 4 areas of innovation. Those that are science-based, they have ideas that come straight out of the laboratory, and they're rare. Turning an invention or a breakthrough discovery into a business is often a long, slow, and costly journeys. I've seen this route from a spin-out from Surrey. There was a company called Biomedical Instruments, Surrey Medical Imaging, which is a biomedical instrument. It involved magnetic resonance technology. It came out of physics. There was another company called Stingray that was involved in looking at the change in laser frequency under pressure, and they developed that for use in hydrophones. But it's a rare and unusual strategy. We see engineering companies that tend to look at supply chain or technology opportunities. These companies are looking for improved product specification or components, and they commonly work within their supply chain, or there's a technology solution or meeting new requirements. There's a couple of examples. We've got a company on the park called Gnosis, which is involved in self-healing cables and developing technologies around that. Or in the case of SI, which is involved in these robotic mowers, is just one example of the kind of activity they're engaged in. There's companies involved in efficiency-driven innovation, and it's about increasing volume, about cost reduction, improved quality, and more know-how. And an example is IDBS, which started on the park with 2 people. It created the electronic research notebook, built up a £40 million business, and made a trade sale a couple of years ago to a company that needed this digital platform to run their major business. And the company that bought them is called Danaher. It's a $1 billion company that bought IDBS. So it can be done. And in terms of customer-focused innovation, it involves developing new business models, products and services, involves a process commonly of rapid iteration and looking for unmet needs. And there's an example here, an unusual picture here for this. Fitzpatrick referrals are on the park. And in my view, his ideas match this pattern to a degree. He runs a veterinary practice, but he's involved in very interesting work. And we also have examples from the computer game sector, which is very strong in Guildford. And there are new opportunities we've had on the park. We had a Nottingham graduate come down and build a technology company behind internet retailing back in the 90s. It's a long time ago, but it's spotting where the new trends are going. And I've got a couple more slides. In this one, I've got, I'm going to talk about collaboration. I came across this diagram in my work looking at how big companies collaborate. And it's how Huawei manage collaboration. If we look at the bottom left quadrant, then if the company, Huawei, has low in-house competence and an unclear business outlook, it then looks for high levels of collaboration. And the same logic applies in the other quadrants. So you can see your technology, your ideas against these opportunities to see if you can fit into the mechanism. So in your research, you may find a clue of how you can address these opportunities. And if this policy also applies to acquisition, and it also applies to acquisition by large corporations of small companies. And in the final slide, going back to the second slide I put up, I think there was employment. What kind of jobs might young people look at with a career in front of them or expect to see? And this is a mind-boggling list to my generation. I've had to look up some of these, like Scrum Master. It appears it's an organizer who eliminates obstacles to progress new concepts. There's professional tribers who assimilate teams to solve problems, and of course, many other jobs. But there is one that's not there, and that is beware of the digital dictator. So over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Malcolm. Does anybody have any questions they want to pose to Malcolm?
Stunned silence. Or you've seen it all before.
No. No, Malcolm, you stunned everybody to silence.
Well, I guess just is worth saying that this view in front of you is a production factory. It's a factory for 170 companies, 4,500 people pre-COVID, all involved in technology businesses. 40% of them came out of laboratories. And there's a process. So in the bottom left, there's the Surrey Tech Centre with Set Squared, where you can take your ideas and develop them. There's the opportunity to scale into the other buildings. And in that process, there has been immense success. The companies here are producing twice per individual the gross value added to the economy. So it just demonstrates that if you actually have a production unit like a science park associated with the university, there's a real opportunity. And I guess with organizations like the Set Squared on the park, you can try ideas out. And within universities, you have research and innovation offices, you have a business school. And so there's always that opportunity for testing the idea. And it's worth it because sometimes you hit something that has immense value in the commercial world.
Thank you. Glenn Parry's popped in the chat, Malcolm. I always wonder about ideas. How do we start off to see if they are worth moving on?
Well, it depends on, I mean, it sounds as a silly comment, but it depends on the starting point. There's, you have to expose it to assessment of demand and whether you can raise the finance, and you have to measure it against competition. And it's interesting that a long time ago, the guy who started Set Squared, he had the idea that is now behind Deliveroo, but he had it for just sandwiches in Guildford on bicycle. He could go down to on a bicycle into Guildford all before the cafe opened, and he could bring sandwiches back and sell them to people. So I guess if he had had a really entrepreneurial flair, he might have been able to develop that idea. But he could see a need. And I think that the best way to answer your question is to look and see, is there a market need? Can I deliver this idea at a cost to the customer that's going to save them from the cost that they have at the moment? Is it going to save them some time? What's it going to do? So you can marry it against various techniques, against various ideas with, for example, the business model canvas, which is, you can just go to the internet and see how it works. And you can start to apply the idea to that and talk through it with colleagues, people who've got a commercial understanding. And if you can do it with somebody who's already in business, they'll be able to say, well, that looks as though it's got potential. Go and see Set Squared. They really do know what they're talking about and will stop you in your tracks or say, yep, it looks as though it's potential. And you have to see it in the context of what else is on the market, and whether you're going to be able to finance it, and whether you actually have the skills to do it. It's the most successful companies are where you have one entrepreneur looking in and running the technology and the ideas internally in the systems, and one looking out as a salesperson, because then you cover both angles, market and delivery. There's no surefire technique. It's an element of luck in it. I
have a question for you, Malcolm, actually.
Sure.
You've had a very long and successful career over at Research Park. What have been the highs for you?
What's in there?
What have been the highlights for you in your career at the Research Park?
Well, the highlight comes every time I do a deal. There is a immense satisfaction in being able to make a successful commitment to a company and then see them grow. So I think that the idea of recruiting Smith Associates back in 1986 happened to be the 1st of April, which is April Fool's Day. And I remember it well. And we now have in Guildford BAE Intelligence Services, which was the ultimate evolution of the company that we recruited back in those early days. And we've been able to support them through a series of steps. And today, that business represents the cybersecurity arm of BAE, which has added to their land, sea, and air defense capability, in effect. So that string of events has been enormous. And I've seen it in other companies as well. So seeing talent flourish. So the highlights come every day, because every day is a new opportunity. People walk into the office, they've come up with an idea, future biogas. How do you develop technology that came out of fermentation in the university into gas production? And they now run a successful business doing that. There's 170 of them involved in it. So there's a reward in that, and of course made money for the university. That's what we all have to do. I think if you don't make money for your institution,
exactly,
then you don't get employed. Pretty simple.
Okay, I have another question in the chat. I'm considering providing scientific methodological consultancy service. I know it may sound a naive question, but I wonder how you would actually start and what support the university can provide. What is the university's viewpoint on staff starting a business, dual employment, conflict of interest, especially in the case of consultancy, if applicable?
Well, there is a series of protocols that are already in place to govern the latter parts of your statement. So how do you start it off? Well, to be honest, it sounds pretty silly, but if you were to walk into the office of Will Lovegrove, who is acting or maybe head of innovation, and say, make an appointment with him, sit down and say, this is what I am going to do. Now, this methodology, now, why is it, you have to kind of ask yourself some questions that he will ask you. And one of the slides that I put up alluded to the series of questions. What am I selling? Why is it going to benefit the customer? Who is the customer? So if you can start to map those ideas out as a set of steps and then go and see Will, he'll sign a non-disclosure agreement with you, and then you can work through the process. If you wanted to skip that, and you could always just start by going straight to Set Squared. And I think that there is a website where you can fill in the form to get eligibility for going in there. In terms of the position the university adopts with, if you have intellectual property and you've developed it on the campus, then the university has a right over it. It's in your employment contract. But if you build a consultancy basis, there is also now regulation for that. And if you feel that you can earn more doing that, you can always go along and see the system and say, well, maybe I only work 4 days a week, and then I'll build up my consultancy business. But within the university, they do provide, I believe, if you sign up for consultancy work through that system, they give you professional indemnity insurance, but that needs to be checked. It used to be the case. So you can do it on that basis. But and I guess you have to also think about which sector are you going to work on for your consultancy. So there's a few routes there, and I hope one of those at least leads you to the Research and Innovation Office on campus.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions before we wrap up? Okay, one final thing then, Malcolm. Do you have any advice to our early career researchers before you go this morning?
Well, I do, which is to say, you're undertaking research, and I guess you do it because you have a very, very strong loyalty to your subject. You're absolutely committed to that, possibly a greater commitment to that than your institution, because your career depends on your capacity to produce publications and your capacity to get those publications covered through citations. But there's another dimension to it, which is to say, always look to see where you can find impact beyond social impact or economic impact, beyond what you're doing. Is there an opportunity where you can see that there might be a chance for some intellectual property, which then could extend your personal, social loyalty of your subject into the public domain? And that takes effort. I mean, in a sense, you can do that by going to, say, trade fairs, because you'll see what trade fairs in your area are talking about. Conferences, and at conferences you might see people who've put up stands who are selling into your industry and into your technology. So there's always that eye, which is the eye of the entrepreneur, to say, what can I do to commercialize what I'm doing? And the opportunities exist now more than they did, because the internet is a valuable tool to be able to test out ideas. And I'm no great shakes at the internet, as my wife will say, but it still represents a powerful, powerful tool in the right hands. So I would address a bit of time to that when you're not at the lab bench. And very, very good luck.
Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you so much for giving us your time this morning, and thank you everybody for coming along and listening to Malcolm's talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie is a long-standing guest. You've been here from the very beginning, Julia.
I know, no, I work with Julia.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, she's...
And Lily.
Okay.
Well, all I can say is I hope that was interesting. It was.
No,
for
it was
me
really interesting.
preparing it.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Good. Yeah, always a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
And thanks for the invitation. Okay.
Tim
I've got
Riches, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Would you-
I don't know how to turn this off.
I'll end it for everyone now, but just quickly, did you want me to send you the recording I made of this?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send it across to you.
Yeah, just I don't think I've ever had a recording done before. So
Well, no, normally because we do them in person.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Stood up many times and spoken.